The last thing I remember before the impact was the smell of wet asphalt and the thought that I'd forgotten to buy a hostess gift for my mother. I was crossing Fifth Avenue, the light still blinking white, when a delivery truck ran the red and turned my body into a physics problem. The sound of my own ribs cracking registered before the pain did a dull, muffled snap like stepping on a bag of ice. Then the pavement came up and swallowed me whole. I woke up in a hospital bed 16 hours later with a tube in my arm and the distinct sensation that someone had replaced my torso with shattered glass. My name is Vesper Sinclair, and until that moment, I thought the worst thing that could happen to me was another Thanksgiving dinner where my mother pretended I didn't exist while doting on my older sister like she'd personally cured world hunger. I was wrong. The curtain around my bed was half drawn, and I could hear the nurse at the station just outside, a soft, practiced voice making the kind of call no one wants to hear on the other end. "Mrs. Sinclair? This is Mount Sinai calling about your daughter, Vesper. She's been in a serious accident." Silence. Then the nurse again, her tone shifting just slightly. "Yes, she's stable, but she's in the ICU. Multiple fractures. Internal bleeding. The doctors are monitoring." Another pause. "Longer this time." "I understand," the nurse said. "But she's asking for you. It would mean a lot if—" I heard the click of a phone being hung up on the other end before she could finish. The nurse, a woman in her 50s with kind eyes and a navy scrub cap, stepped into my curtained cubicle a moment later and saw that I was awake. "Your parents said they'll come," she lied, because she was a good person, and I was a girl with a fractured pelvis who'd just heard everything. "I heard you," I said. My voice came out like gravel. "What did my mother actually say?" The nurse hesitated. Then, because she was the type who understood that dignity mattered more than comfort, she told me the truth. She said, "We'll come if she doesn't make it." I stared at the ceiling tiles and let that sentence settle into my bones. I wasn't surprised. That was the worst part. Some small, wounded animal inside me had expected exactly this, had known since childhood that my presence in that family was something they tolerated, not something they valued. But hearing it spoken aloud, flat and final, was different. It was the difference between suspecting a door is locked and trying to handle yourself. I didn't cry. I'd stopped crying over them years ago. I just lay there, counting the holes in the acoustic tile, while the nurse adjusted my four and pretended not to pity me. The next 3 days were a blur of surgeries and silent recovery. My sister didn't call. My father didn't call. I received one text from my mother, sent at 2:47 a.m. as if she'd remembered me in a moment of insomnia and then immediately regretted it. "Glad you're alive. Let us know when you're discharged. No, we love you. No, we're coming." Just a reminder that I was expected to handle myself the way I'd been handling myself since I was 15 and realized that asking for help in that house was like asking for water in a desert. On the 4th day, a hospital billing coordinator came to my room with a clipboard and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She explained that my insurance, a policy I'd bought myself through the university, would cover about 60% of the emergency care. The remaining balance, after everything, was just over $87,000. I remember the number because I wrote it down on a napkin and stared at it until the ink blurred. "I'll figure out a payment plan," I said, because what else was there to say? The coordinator nodded and left. 10 minutes later, a different woman appeared in my doorway, a hospital clerk with a petite frame and a nervous energy, clutching a small, square box wrapped in brown paper. No bow. No card. Just twine and craft paper, like something from an old movie. "Miss Sinclair." She stepped closer and lowered her voice. "A man in a black jacket came to the billing office about an hour ago. He paid your entire balance. In full. And he asked me to give you this." She placed the box on my bedside tray as if it contained explosives. I blinked at it. "Who is he?" "He didn't give a name. Just said," she glanced over her shoulder, then back at me. "He said, don't open it until you get home. Everything will make sense then." I must have looked as confused as I felt, because she added, "He was very specific about that part. He made me repeat it back twice." Then she was gone, and I was alone with a mystery box and the unsettling knowledge that a stranger had just erased a debt that my own family wouldn't even acknowledge. I was discharged 3 days later with a walker, a prescription for oxycodone, and a follow-up appointment that I'd probably have to reschedule around my graduate classes. The taxi ride to my tiny studio apartment in Queens took 40 minutes, every pothole a fresh negotiation with my broken body. I limped up 3 flights of stairs, locked my door, and sat on my secondhand sofa with the box in my lap and my heart beating somewhere behind my fractured sternum. I opened it. Inside, nestled in a bed of tissue paper, were 3 items: a folded letter on heavy cream stationery, a small velvet pouch, and a photograph. The photograph was old, faded at the edges, the colors leaching into sepia. It showed a man in his early 30s, dark-haired, sharp-jawed, holding a baby wrapped in a white hospital blanket. He was looking at the camera with an expression I couldn't quite name. Love, maybe? Or grief? Or some impossible combination of both. I turned the photo over. On the back, in handwriting I didn't recognize, were 3 words. Vesper, my daughter. The letter was longer. I read it once. Then I read it again, because the first time my brain refused to process what it was saying. The man in the photograph was my biological father. His name was Julian Croft, and he had been searching for me for 23 years. The people who raised me, the Sinclairs, the family that had just told a hospital they'd visit if I died, were not my parents. They had never been my parents. They had been paid to take me, to raise me in obscurity, to keep me hidden from a father who had the resources and the will to find me. But they hadn't just hidden me. According to the letter, they had been collecting a monthly trust disbursement in my name since the day I was born. A trust that Julian Croft had established. A trust that, by the terms of its creation, should have reverted to me on my 18th birthday. I was 24 years old. I had worked 3 jobs through college. I had taken out loans. I had eaten ramen for weeks at a time while my mother told me that character was built through suffering, that they couldn't afford to help me, that I needed to learn to stand on my own 2 feet. All while they were stealing from me. The velvet pouch contained a key, a safe deposit box key, with a bank name and a number etched into the metal. At the bottom of the letter, Julian Croft had written one final line. I've been waiting a long time to meet you. When you're ready, the key will open more than a box. It will open the truth about everything they took from you. And everything you can take back. I didn't open the safe deposit box the next day. Or the day after that. I spent 2 weeks healing in my apartment, letting the stitches dissolve and the bruises fade from purple to yellow, while I researched everything I could about Julian Croft. He was real. A venture capitalist who'd made his fortune in biotech, then vanished from public life about 24 years ago. No scandals, no criminal record, just a man who'd retreated into extreme privacy after what the financial blogs described as a personal tragedy. I found one grainy photo of him at a charity gala in 2001, the same sharp jaw from the photograph in my box, now older, gray at the temples, but still carrying that same unreadable expression. When I finally took the key to the bank in Midtown, the box contained exactly what I needed. Trust documents. Original adoption papers sealed, illegal to release, and yet here they were. 23 years of monthly bank statements showing disbursements from a trust in my name, routed through a shell account that led directly to Patricia and Douglas Sinclair. My parents. The total was just over $1.7 million. There was also a letter from Julian. Short. Direct. I've hired the best family law firm in New York. When you're ready, they're already on retainer. All they need is your call. I made the call that afternoon. The law firm was a sleek operation on Park Avenue, all glass walls and silent elevators. My attorney, a woman named Margot Chin, reviewed the documents with the detached precision of a surgeon examining a tumor. By the time she finished, she had identified 5 separate felonies: wire fraud, identity theft, embezzlement, conspiracy to commit fraud, and she smiled at this part, violation of the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act, which carried additional penalties because the trust had been established in California, where the laws were particularly brutal. We can freeze their assets today, Margot said, sliding a document across her desk. Civil suit, criminal referral, the works. The question is, how public do you want this to be? I thought about my mother's voice on the phone. Will come if she doesn't make it. I want it to be the last thing they ever recover from, I said. Margot's smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. I spent the next 10 months being the perfect daughter. That was the part nobody expected. Not the detectives, not the lawyers, and certainly not the Sinclairs. After my discharge, I called my mother and apologized. I told her I understood why they couldn't come to the hospital. The distance, the expense, the inconvenience. I made my voice soft and small, the voice of the girl they'd raised to never cause trouble. My mother, caught off guard, actually sounded pleased. Well, I'm glad you're being mature about it, she said. We'll see you at Easter. I showed up to Easter with a store-bought pie and a smile. I hugged my sister, complimented her new kitchen renovation, and listened to my father's opinions about the stock market without once rolling my eyes. I let them believe I was the same Vesper, grateful, invisible, financially struggling, conveniently quiet. What they didn't know is that I'd already filed the civil suit. What they didn't know is that the criminal referral was sitting on the district attorney's desk, pending my signal. What they didn't know was that I had hired a forensic accountant who had traced every dollar they'd spent, the second home in Boca Raton, my sister's Range Rover, the private school tuition for my niece, all of it funded, at least in part, by money stolen from a trust that should have been mine. I attended 4th of July at their country club. I smiled through brunch on my mother's birthday. I let my sister complain about her nanny and nodded sympathetically when my father grumbled about entitled millennials who didn't understand hard work. All the while, I was recording. Not conversations, that would have been legally dicey, but a different kind of evidence. Photos of the renovations. Screenshots of social media posts where my mother bragged about their investment property. Credit card receipts my forensic accountant had legally subpoenaed. A paper trail so thorough and so damning that when Margot finally filed the full evidentiary package with the court, the judge granted an emergency asset freeze within 6 hours. But the piece de resistance was Thanksgiving. I volunteered to host it this year. You've done it for so long, I said to my mother, my voice dripping with manufactured warmth. Let me take care of everything. I found this beautiful venue in Manhattan. My treat. My mother, who loved nothing more than an opportunity to be seen at an exclusive venue without spending her own money, accepted immediately. She invited 47 guests, including her entire social circle, 3 business partners of my father's, and the head of her charity board. She didn't ask how I could afford it. She never asked. The venue was a private dining room at the Whitby Hotel. Floor-to-ceiling windows. Crystal chandeliers. A long mahogany table set for 50. I wore a black silk dress and the expression of a woman who had already won. They arrived at 6 o'clock. My mother swept in wearing a fur stole and the smug satisfaction of a woman who believed she was being celebrated. My father was already working the room, shaking hands with his business associates. I clicked the remote again. The screen displayed the criminal referral, stamped and filed. Then the civil suit. Then the emergency asset freeze order, signed by a federal judge that morning. The freeze took effect at 9 a.m., I said. Your accounts are locked. The Boca house is in receivership. The Range Rover, the country club membership, the charity board seat you love so much, it's all tied to assets that don't legally belong to you. My mother's voice came out as a whisper. You little. I would choose your next words very carefully, I said. Because the district attorney is listening. I didn't say it like a threat. I said it like a fact. Because it was. At that exact moment, an investigator from the DA's Financial Crimes Unit was seated at a table near the back, wearing a suit and a discreet earpiece, witnessing every word. My sister looked at me with wide, uncomprehending eyes. Vesper, this is insane. We're your family. No, I said, and for the first time all evening, I let the ice crack just enough for them to see the fire underneath. You're the people who got paid to raise me and still couldn't manage to pretend you cared. You're the woman who told a nurse you'd only visit if I didn't make it. You're the man who signed papers to take a child that wasn't yours and saw nothing but a paycheck. I turned to face my mother directly. You confused my silence for weakness. You confused my patience for compliance. But I wasn't waiting for you to love me. I was waiting for the moment when you had everything to lose. I set the remote down on the table with a soft click. That moment is now. Then I picked up my glass, took a single sip of champagne, and walked out of the room. Behind me, the silence shattered into chaos, raised voices, a woman crying, my father shouting something about lawyers. I didn't look back. I had seen everything I needed to see. In the lobby, I found Julian Croft waiting for me. He was older than his photograph, his hair more silver than dark, but his eyes were exactly what I remembered from that faded picture, warm, steady, and a little bit sad. He didn't say anything at first. Neither did I. Then he nodded toward the door. There's a diner around the corner that's open late. They do a decent turkey sandwich. I know it's not a traditional Thanksgiving, but I smiled. Actually smiled. The kind of smile that starts somewhere deep and quiet and surprises you with its lightness. I could eat, I said. We walked out into the cold November night, and for the first time in 24 years, I didn't feel invisible. I didn't feel tolerated. I didn't feel like a guest in someone else's life. I felt like a woman who had finally come home. I didn't lose my family that night. I lost the version of them that needed me silent. The version of me that let them. That girl died on an operating table while a nurse made a phone call and a mother delivered an ultimatum. What walked out of that hospital, what walked into that dining room, what walked into the cold air with her real father at her side, that was someone else entirely. That was Vesper Croft. And she was just getting started.